Hey, welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brodinski. Somewhere on that split screen is Autumn Allinson and Christopher K. Shortell. Hey, thanks, gang. Good to see you. We were anxious actually to talk to Autumn about what's going on with the Board of Ed and give us a little quickie update as to the status of distance learning, in-person learning. How's it going in your view? What's up?
So, as far as the update on where we stand right now, for right now, middle schools and high schools are closed until January 19th. However, on Tuesday, Dr. Menzo sent out an update saying the data is trending downward as far as spread within the community. So he may, after the Thanksgiving holiday, reevaluate whether or not they go back sooner. But for right now, the middle schools and high schools are closed and the elementary schools are still in full day. That being said, I know that there's a lot of concern around what people can do with their kids for the times that they can't stay home. There are programs running through Boys and Girls Club and YMCA that are full day, part-time, not every day. There are many different options. And it's an affordable service from my perspective, but as in it's not thousands of dollars, and it also gives kids a place where they can be together and also still have somebody looking after them and helping them with their distance learning.
So
um,
a
Go
couple
ahead.
of things that I picked up on, just general reading. And one, again, I want to just touch on this briefly, is where this leaves special needs kids. And the other is union reaction. Let's go to the union reaction first. What have you picked up as to how the teachers unions locally or across the state are dealing with this?
So it looks like, from the Record Journal article that I read just a little while ago to prepare, I see that there are some arguments of inequity with, you know, high school and middle school being out of school versus elementary school being in full days. Um, I I can say from my own opinion, not so much as a board member, but more as a person. Um, I do feel like it's there are always going to be things that seem to be unfair, but where we're seeing the data is where there are more cases are with people who have more um, mobility, if you will, regarding sports and after school activities and being out with friends, things like that. And that's more of a middle school and high school level concern where the parent isn't pretty much directly responsible for getting their kids to all of the places like it is in elementary school. I also think it's hard to say, well, it's not fair that some people aren't having to do in-person learning, when how do you tell them, okay, well, since it's not fair, everybody has to go back now.
Yeah.
you know
Chris,
I Go ahead.
how do you view it, Mr. Shortell, from where you sit?
Well, I think, first of all, I agree with Autumn. I watched a little bit of the Board of Ed meeting the other night, and my wife had it on. So she had it on, I think, almost the whole time. And we ate dinner watching the meeting. But I think that there is inequities. Yes, there are inequities. I would argue in a perfect world, on a perfect day when there's no COVID, the job of a fourth grade teacher and the job of a high school teacher is not the same. They deal with different issues. I'm not saying one's easier or harder. So I think there's inherent inequities. The way I view it is I agreed with you, Autumn, when you made the comment at the meeting that you think that people should have the high school and middle school teachers should have the choice to distance teach or not. And look, my kids are in the elementary level. Well, one of them still is. And so we've been living in the elementary world for the last 7 years, and we love the elementary world and all those teachers. But to me, it's almost akin to, what if a microburst went through the west side of town and took out Sheehan and took out Fritz and took out Highland? And those 3 schools are out of commission for 3 months. I guess it would be unfair. Yeah, those teachers can't go to school for 3 months while they rebuild the schools, and the teachers at Pond Hill and Rock Hill do have to go to school. That's an inequity. So to me, this is kind of similar in the sense that if the data is telling us, as Autumn just said, that and we get these emails every day, most of the cases are at the middle and high school levels. I have zero issue with a high school teacher having the choice to say, I'm going to Zoom teach from my home versus having to go into Lyman Hall or Sheehan. So I guess that's where I line up on it, as you know, as a person,
Well,
too, and as a parent.
just fine tune the issue a little bit for Autumn. You know, the choice, I guess, that was discussed at the board meeting,
Mhm.
I think, was whether or not teachers should have the option, all teachers should have the option if to distance teach from home, or should they be required to go into the school building to distance teach? Was that the discussion on them, and how did it go?
That was the discussion at the special Board of Ed meeting that we had last Tuesday. I mean, it probably continued a bit on Monday, although I had a work emergency, so I wasn't in the meeting for the whole thing. I would say that, so I was only answering on the overall, like working schools being remote versus schools being in person. However, I, again, as I said in the special meeting, I would die on that hill that a person who is professional should be allowed to choose for themselves if they want to go to work or if they don't, and or not go to work, but go to a physical building. I have the choice to go to a physical building, which I did yesterday, for the first time ever since I got hired. um, and I can say it doesn't change much, you know. If you choose to work from home right now, they're actually encouraging us not to go to work, but if we want to go to the building, we can. So that's the reason why it never became a thing for me, but I'm still working tons of hours a day as our teachers, as our staff, as our administrators. I'm still online almost from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. every single day doing my job.
Yeah.
Teachers aren't different from that.
Chris, as to the perception, I'm just talking about the perception versus reality of requiring teachers to go into the building to distance teach. Okay, they're going to distance teach, but assuming the rule is you can't do it from home, got to go into the building, is the perception that this is a control discipline measure, or is the perception that there's another rationale?
I don't know. I can't speak to what the perception is among teachers. I can only speak to how I don't know what else.
That's
Yeah, what else could it be? What is the value in forcing when we're being told by every other authority figure not to go out more than you have to, not to congregate in groups of larger than 10, not to have your relatives over for Thanksgiving, not to do all these things. And yet, I mean, with all due respect, Dr. Menzo sends an email yesterday talking, and I love Dr. Menzo, but saying, oh, don't go, go get together for Thanksgiving. I know it's hard. At the same time, though, you have to all go to school, teachers. You have to go in the 100 teachers have to go in the building at Lyman Hall, distance teach. Why? For what? Because maybe, I don't know, maybe some teacher went to the grocery store once and someone else saw that. I have no idea. But to me, I don't know what other value there is, unless there was there could be, if a teacher had a technology issue, that the technology, I don't know, they're teaching from laptops. So I don't understand. I don't know. I don't get it.
Okay. Autumn, I wanted to get back to something I touched on just a couple of minutes ago, and that is the special needs student, the special needs communities. Are they undergoing a particular hardship in view of this configuration, this arrangement, and is this the best we can possibly do on what you're doing now?
I can say that, yes, the special needs community in our schools is definitely going through a hardship right now, because there's a lot more IEPs in general, 504s. It requires a lot more one-to-one contact. And when you go distance learning, your para is tapping in with you from a distance, and they're still looking at a screen, but I think they are, and I can tell you that Amy and all the school administration, they are doing the very best that they can in a situation that is just like awful. And I understand maybe where your question is coming from as well, because there are a lot of concerned parents regarding their children with special needs and not having, an adequate para, or not having their child being kind of extra depressed or whatever. And not whatever, because I don't want to make it sound flippant, but at the same time, there's not a lot that we can do to make it better for everybody. All students right now are extra depressed, and all students right now are experiencing a hardship. And with that comes, of course, special needs students are going to also experience a hardship. And I don't know how to stress it enough that, you know, we all understand that these decisions are not easy. So it's really, it's it's a really difficult situation, because you want things to be equitable. This is the quote of the day, right? But it's it's just not going to be the same until everybody is able to go back and be in a classically normal situation.
Yeah, let me change the subject on you, and focus on the aftermath of the national elections. We usually don't talk about national politics on the show. Once in a while, we'll dip into it. We don't. No one wants to hear Christopher K. Shortell and Mike Brzezinski talk about their views on national politics. They can watch Fox or MSNBC or whatever they want to do. But it has been an unusual season, and I'm just wondering, as a freshman or rookie Board of Ed member, whether you've sensed some bleed over from the national scene into local Board of Education interactions. Your thoughts on that?
I definitely can feel the heat of national politics on Board of Ed. I think that, going back to perception is reality, because if you perceive something, it doesn't matter what I think of your perception. Your perception is your reality of me. So representing myself as a Republican, if nobody talks to me, they can think that I have motives that I don't have, or opinions on topics that I don't have. I do see in I do see some difficulties in communication, both between the public on the forums and in the Board of Ed itself, because I think that sometimes, and it could just be personalities, and to me it feels like politics, but I'm new to this, so I don't know the histories there, but I can say that I do feel at times that we don't make decisions based on politics, but we do and don't like each other based on politics. And it can be unfair.
I'm going to get Chris in this in just a minute, because he had some experience in the Board of Ed, and of course, council's a different culture, sort of. But you've been a little careful with your choice of words, a little vague, and I'm not sure what you're getting at. But I do sense some discomfort, given the national scene. I don't want to break your arm or pull your teeth, but can you get more specific as to what you're sensing, what you're feeling, and how it may impact your duties as a board member?
Yeah. So I don't call people names based on their political party. I see it all over the forums. I don't have an opinion. When I ran for Board of Ed, I walked up to the Democrats, I walked up to the Republicans, I walked up to every member of public that I could talk to, and give a straw. um, and and I had very few people say anything to me about the fact that I was a Republican. But I did have some people say, well, tell us what your thoughts are. And, I told them, and essentially it's not a secret. It's on my Board of Ed Facebook page and all that. My thoughts are, I'm financially conservative. I'm a little bit more conservative because I had a conservative upbringing. However, socially, I think people should be left to do what they want to do, and I think that we don't need the government regulating who we marry, what we do with our bodies, things like that. I'm just, and this may get me in trouble, but at the same time, socially, I think that the left has it as far as saying, let's make it easier for people to be who they are, but when I shared those thoughts to some folks, they said, well, then you're obviously in the wrong party. And I'm like, but I don't know, So I also had some people who know who they are, who wouldn't talk to me at all because I was running and they were also running. And that bled over into after the election. So it's okay. It doesn't matter. We all have different personalities. And as things have gone forward, we're working together well. It's just that as a non-political person, I don't like being, it's the same thing. I don't know, because I don't want to say that. So it's the same thing as being judged on another, like a physical characteristic of yourself, right?
Yeah,
And that's exactly the principle that you shouldn't have. And I'm not going to get more specific than that.
that's a fair
But
point. I want to get Chris on this because he's had experience both on the board and the council. Chris, the general question for you is have you sensed in the past and now currently, have you sensed a bleed over from national politics to your role as a counselor, a Republican counselor, or you don't sense that at all?
I haven't sensed it. And when I was on the board, that was back in the peaceful days of 2014 and 2015, when things were perfect, I guess. But I didn't sense it then. But I think a lot of it depends on the personalities. Now certainly, we've dealt with issues in the council. We've dealt with issues. We had, resolution on reopening, which is, I guess, more of a state issue, and we've had some stuff. I feel like in the last year that's been more outside of the council, like the toll resolution but national. I don't know. I haven't sensed it at the council level, or I don't know. I haven't.
Okay.
And I would just say, but I would say, to Autumn's point, Autumn, you talked about the forums. I'm assuming you're talking about Facebook. See, I don't go on Facebook. And I think my advice to anybody in this is the forums, those keyboard warriors, you know what, they can show up to a meeting and
Right.
they can come to the microphone, or in this instance, it's even easier. They can go on Zoom and type in, go to meeting. But I don't put any stock in what people post on forums. I was there early on, I was on there, and then I just left because there is no value. Most of those people are cowards and they won't say anything to your face. They're too scared to go to a meeting. They'll just put stuff on forums and argue and go back and forth in these long threads. It's not even worth it. That's just my own choice, but I don't think it's worth it. You have enough on your plate. Forums aren't worth it.
Before we get, go ahead, Autumn, and get to
I
final.
don't typically go on them too much either, but a lot of times, I'm tagged. And as much as I love ignoring tags, I really there are just instances where I can't. And usually I will respond, but obviously I'm also not going to go down a dirt path with a bunch of crackpots. So
Yeah.
I want to change the subject, guys, to electric school buses. Based on what I read and picked up a little bit by flipping through a recent Board of Ed meeting, the Wallingford Board of Education is having this is my editorial word, I'm using a dalliance, I guess, with a notion of getting electric school buses into the Wallingford fleet of school buses. And Durham School Bus Company has made one or more presentations. I'm going to get to Autumn about that in a second as to what they've done, how often they've come in just a minute. Little fun fact, preparing for the show, Durham School Bus has nothing to do with Durham, Connecticut, right? I mean, I think some people may see, oh, Durham, Durham's right next door. You may think it's a small local company, it's Durham, Connecticut, but it's not. It's actually an overseas company. And this comes from Wikipedia. That's as far as I've gotten. But I guess in 1999, an international corporation called National Express acquired this bus company for $175 million. That was in 1999. National Express, I think, is traded on the London Stock Exchange. And they had, they had in 2019 revenues of about $3 to $4 billion. It depends on the exchange rate, dollars to pounds. The whole point of this is that may be totally irrelevant, but it also, it's nice to know who you're dealing with. It is a big, complicated, sophisticated company that apparently would like to entice the Wallingford Board of Education into a fleet of electric school buses. Autumn, take it from here. What has transpired with respect to this so far, and what's your assessment of the electric school bus issue?
So we were presented with 3 options to consider, all of which came with a promise to sign a 10-year contract if not on the research part, but once if we approved the whatever level of plan, they wanted a 10-year contract. So I'll get back to that. But there were proposals for 4 to 5 buses, 17 buses, and like 33 buses. What we focused the most on, because Durham presented it as the the optimal level of buses, was the 17 bus plan, which would have come with a again, for research purposes, they wanted us to say, okay, go ahead and do the research on this, even though we're not committing to anything, and write the grant proposal for the Volkswagen grant. Now, in the meeting, we discussed it pretty heavily. This came with 17 buses came with, over this 10-year contract that they wanted, a 6 to 8% increase in the total contract value. So just to put it into perspective, or do you want me to break it down right now?
I think what I want to do is I want to give a little more background, and then I want you to break it down. But give me a minute or two first,
Okay,
and then we'll come back to you. Just by way of context,
go for it.
Electric school buses are hugely more expensive than standard diesel or gasoline school buses. Really, much more expensive. And what I think has made this concept, I don't want to use the word feasible because that may be overstating it, but maybe it's coming up now because Volkswagen Corporation got nailed a few years back for cheating on the emission standards rules of 1 or more countries. I don't have the details of that, as beyond the scope of this segment of the show, but Volkswagen got nailed with a huge fine. And part of this settlement was a condition that grants would have to be distributed, I guess, around the world, but I'm not sure. But grants would have to be distributed to help correct, the pollution issue that Volkswagen kind of contributed to itself. So there's cash available, and I think Durham School Buses is saying, hey, maybe we can get some grants and help lower the cost of these school buses. But I think what the status is, they don't know yet how much of a grant they're going to get. I'm not sure they know the final cost of the school buses, and I'm not sure they have a pro forma income statement or cash flow, or I'm not sure, what they're offering. Autumn, back to you. Take it up from where I left off.
So specifically, diesel school bus runs around 100,000, give or take, and an electric bus is about 5 times that, 475,000, at least at the level that we saw when Lion came and showed us the electric bus. Now, a lot of that is, supposed to be covered in this Volkswagen grant, you know, and that's where it makes it appealing to consider electric buses. I personally love the idea of electric buses, but I think that we need to talk more about the actual specifics, which are we have a $6.1 million, and this is all rounded, so it's not specific. We have a $6.1 million contract with Durham. For the first year, we would spend an additional $430,000. So that's almost one bus that we're buying with no grant money. Additionally, I would assume that we would be also agreeing to the contract increases that we currently have, which are 3% per year. So essentially, next year we would pay an additional 3% on top of that 7% that I'm using for my estimates. And it continues to basically compound year over year after that, because we're not only paying 3% on the $6.1 million contract, but now we're paying it on the $6.6 million contract that essentially, so that we would essentially be signing. Additionally, in the state, we can't sign a contract longer than 7 years. So it's not even a viable option for us to sign it or say that we could sign a 10-year contract, because we would have to get a waiver from the state. So I think that really what needs to happen is there would need to be more research around asking us for something that is feasible within the parameters of the current situation. And also, why would we increase the amount we're spending on buses when we don't know how much the grant is going to, or saying we would increase it by this amount, and then essentially we don't own the assets. So what happens?
I want to pass it over to Christopher Kay, because he's the guy that votes on the budget. And the way I'm reading your comments, Autumn, it's going to cost more. And if it costs more, that comes back into the annual budget, that comes back into the mill rate. And the guy joining us, Christopher K. Shortell, is going to vote on this. So Chris, from the perspective of a council or counselor, as I just talk, I guess about yourself, unless you've got some insight as to others think, what's your reaction to this just very initial presentation by Autumn?
Speaking on behalf of the Republican majority, I will
That's
tell
what
you,
I want.
we want solar powered buses, period. So if you can't stick solar panels on those buses, we're not voting. No, I don't know that I don't know that it would get by the mayor, and I don't know that I would blame him. I mean, in terms of don't forget, by the time we get the budget, the mayor has already, cut it down. So this doesn't sound like a great, it sounds great in theory, but when you look at the numbers that Autumn just went over and all the specifics in terms of the length of time and the stuff you talked about, I don't sense a lot of support. Again, I can't speak for anybody on the council, but reading the tea leaves, I mean, I don't know. Not a lot of, I don't think there'd be a lot of support.
What's in it for the town of Wallingford?
So from my perspective, I have actually implemented electric vehicles that came at our own capital expenditure for a company that I worked for at Unilever for yard management trucks. So I can say that if this were an asset that we were investing in, or on for Durham's part, you could save a lot of money on gas, essentially. We saved our entire investment in 3 years, which this proposal doesn't suggest would be something that they would be considering. So again, I agree with Councillor Shortell that this would never get passed, the top level to even be voted on by the council. But for Wallingford, there are a lot of clean air benefits. There's a lot of research that suggests that students are developing asthma at early ages because of riding school buses. It could mitigate some of those health concerns. I mean, besides all of the things that kind of go around environmental impact, um, I think they're also like, they're not as loud. You know, students can hear each other talk, although I'm sure the bus drivers won't love that, because that's been a major conversation piece in White Plains where they have them. They're like, we never knew we didn't want to hear was students talking so much. But you know, I we are a STEM town. I do understand wanting to implement science and technology on all levels, and also to say, you know, these the Green Air Acts that I don't really know what they're actually called, but Governor Lamont wants you know, more electric fleet by 2050. Now, granted, it's 2020 and the time of COVID. So, you know, 2050 is a really long way away if every year is as long as this one. But it's, you know, I think that there are a lot of health benefits to not putting more diesel emissions in the air, but I do understand that the general taxpayer is not going to want that to be the answer to why we
Yeah,
spend more money.
so let me be the devil's advocate just for a minute, and imagine, if you will, a town council meeting. It wouldn't be this town council, maybe it would be, I'm not sure, where an issue came up. Remember, this is fictitious and we're having fun, we're being playful here. So Durham Bus Company comes in front of the council and says something like this: we have a proposal for you, it's going to cost you a lot more money. We're going to get, Durham School Bus Company is going to get a lot more money in their contract. Not only do you have I'm going to hypothesize, a 10-year no bid contract, and let's assume the 7-year limit can be waived or handled somehow. We want a 10-year no bid contract. It's going to cost you more money than your existing contract, and we'd like you to sign on. So I can imagine then the chairman of the Wallingford Town Council saying, it's going to cost us more money. Why are you even here? Goodbye. And they walk out in about 6 minutes. And that would end the conversation. So I'm somewhat befuddled, and I'm being, playful here a little bit as to why the conversation is going on so long if there's substantially more dollars that Wallingford has to spend. Your thoughts on my playful reenactment of what will never happen?
Mike is never playful. I mean, come on. That's just.
So
You're up.
So I would say that this was the first discussion, and I think that Durham definitely took away our opinion that they need to come back to the table with a better plan or offer. The things that are not on that haven't been baked in, if you will, to this proposal are the amount of grant money. So we don't actually know how much grant money we would get, and that would impact the increase in cost. I have a hard time believing that we're going to accept any increase in cost just by the general my general perception after the discussions. And although I really think that electric buses could be one way that Wallingford kind of pulls ourselves into the future and says that we care about the environment and we care about the respiratory health of the people using the buses. I also don't know that where the cost is would ever even get past the front door. It would be different, I think, if it was a 1%.
So I want to switch back to my imaginary council meeting, and Christopher K. Shortell has his microphone on as the issue is being presented. And I can imagine people coming to the presenter's table and laying down or representing studies which show how much pollution school buses add to the air, Wallingford's percentage of that, how many tons of pollutants over 10 years electric school buses in Wallingford, how much pollution would be mitigated, taken out of the air. I didn't phrase that very well, but I hope you know what I mean. The health consequences of having diesel or gasoline school buses and comparing that to the benefits of electric. And by the time the presentation is done with fancy PowerPoints and pictures of nurses and pictures of kids, with medical conditions, I could see the Wallingford Town Council in tears and just begging to give the money away. Chris, don't you agree with that?
We would do a bid waiver. We would do a $10 billion bid waiver. Not only yeah, I mean, I think that there are examples like this, not these dollars, but there are examples of a large societal problem that come before the council, and we could do one little thing in Wallingford, and is it worth it? Because if we do the one little thing in Wallingford, the problem doesn't go away, it still exists everywhere else. Two examples come to mind. Again, not quite apples to apples. We changed we upped the age for buying e-cigarettes in town a couple years ago. That was one thing we did. Second thing I tried to do, and I got no support, was to try to crack down on human trafficking with the massage parlors. In each instance, it was a simple thing we could do in town. But the argument was, well, so what? You do it in Wallingford, you're not going to solve the problem. They're just going to go to Meriden and buy their e-cigarettes or whatever. We did pass the tobacco age. We did raise that age. We took no action on the massage parlors, even though we had an easy solution, which is we should revisit that because it was ridiculous. But my point is, so yeah, Mike, that's going to be the debate. It would be, sure, we can go with Wallingford in our 40-mile silo. We can go to this great clean fuel, but the problem is going to exist everywhere else. And it's why should we be the guinea pigs? Why should we be the ones laying out all the money if North Haven's not doing it, if Meriden's not doing it? So I don't think the town council would just give away the money. I think that would be the response, because I've seen it go both ways with similar things before.
Autumn, you have the final word on this school bus issue. Where do you think, just give us a projection, what's the timing of the next step? Like, when would you know the grants? When would you have a hard proposal? Do you think that Wallingford would get an independent expert, an independent set of eyes on this to assess the value to Wallingford? Just sort of wrap up the topic for us.
So in two things, in response to Mr. Shortell's proposal that every other place isn't doing it, so why should we? It's the same concept as high schools are closed and elementary schools aren't. So why should we, it's not fair. It's that whole, it's not fair argument. So I do understand financially, don't get me wrong, because I'm on the same page with you financially, but where we are right now is that we need Durham to come back with a more feasible proposal. And that's, and I think that that's what we're trying to push for. They will not start a grant writing process without us saying that we'll commit to something, in not that we will definitely commit, but if they get a response and it's favorable, like they want us to agree to some sort of contract extension. The problem that I have is I say you put your reputation on the line and get the grant money, and then you come back to us with a proposal. And that's, I don't think that we should have to say, well, sure, we might agree to that, because we're still saying we don't know if we're going to agree to anything. So the reality is that I think their concern is because if they go out and try to get grants for 17 buses, they will lose a little bit of their reputation with the Volkswagen grant, but they are one of the largest school bus companies in the country. I think they can sacrifice a little bit of that in order to say, in order to put together a better proposal for us, because we're not even going to consider it at the rate that it's at now. So I think that that's really where the school bus is as far as timelines are concerned. I don't have them for you. I know that Mr. Barone is still talking to them about, coming up with something more reasonable. And I know that the environmental teams who have presented in the meetings are also still pushing this forward and trying to get more conversations with Durham. But at this point, I don't have a timeline for you. I do have a timeline though, that from a green perspective, we are getting back our results of the facility study that we did. And so we may have some projects to save money there. So, you know, we're still trying to push forward on green initiatives. But the reality is that when you buy a fixer upper, you can't fix the whole thing, right? At once, like you do it piece by piece. And so we're trying to do our piece with the amount of resources that we currently have. And I think that, um, you know, there will be more to come on it, but it's certainly not going to be a further conversation at this level.
So I want to give you just my takeaway, my initial takeaway, because I want to stay persuadable if I can. So I'm going to give you my takeaway, then go around to Chris and Autumn. You wrap up on my comments. My reaction is this is a statewide problem, and I know there's a statewide goal and maybe soon a national goal about reduction of emissions. But if it's a statewide goal, there should be statewide funding, and every school district should be treated the same somehow. I don't know how that would work out with a Volkswagen grant, because the Volkswagen grant probably doesn't go to a whole state. I don't know the answer to that. But this seems to be a bigger problem than Wallingford's problem. And if it should be tackled, it should be fleets all across all the school districts in the state when we're ready to do it. Subsidized in part by the national government, the state government. You know, I'm not really sure, but I think that's the way to approach it, rather than putting the burden on the taxpayers of Wallingford and beating them over the head with it, you know, the health benefits. I just think that's a little unfair. Chris, your reaction to my reaction, then Autumn, you wrap up, and then we'll close the show.
Yeah, I think I want to clarify something, Autumn. When I was saying before about, well, why don't other towns do it? I was just, Mike had asked me what I thought the council would say, and that's what I think the council would say. Personally, on the two examples that I gave on the tobacco and on this massage parlor thing, I was in both cases advocating that Wallingford lead and Wallingford do something that other towns weren't doing, and to be a leader. And I think when there's value in leading, when you lead, other people may follow. So I just want to clarify that. And I think I think on this whole topic, I like the approach that, like you said, we're looking, it's kind of a first step. There's kind of a back and forth and negotiating. And, you know, Dr. Menzo does a great job. I've said this often. I mean this as a compliment. He runs the school in many ways like he's in the private sector. And I mean that as a full compliment in terms of the innovation that comes out of the school system and things like this. So, you know, there could be something here that the end result could be something that's not a burden to the taxpayers, but it's a step. And it's a step that Wallingford takes, and other people look at it and say, "Wow, Wallingford did it. Maybe we can do it." So I'm hopeful in that case. And I have a follow-up question for Autumn after she talks, Mike. Before you close the show.
Why don't you ask the follow-up question now, and then she can wrap up.
Well, I was going to do so. Sometimes Mike hates this. So when I had Counselor Marone on the show, and when I had Counselor Tada on the show, and Lauren from the Record Journal, I did a rapid fire, and I fired questions, very quick questions. I only have one question for you, Autumn.
But we didn't tell her we were going to do this.
No, we didn't tell her. This is the. I'm being playful. Now I'm being playful. So, all right. Yeah, air quote time. All right. All right, Autumn. Favorite board member, Mike Votto or Kathy Castelli?
Don't answer that.
Oh,
you can't.
Kathy Castelli.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's it. That's all I got.
Kathy Castelli is also my my vice chair for operations, and she has a lot of knowledge to bring. So I talk to her more. That's all. Sorry, Mr. Votto.
Mr. Votto, love it. Love it. Okay.
So just wrap up the that school
sure.
topic for us.
So regarding state funding, I do agree that larger districts, especially districts that actually own their own infrastructure, I would say, as far as buses are concerned, would probably benefit from some sort of state funding or state applying for the grant as one big thing. Also, cities like New Haven, where inevitably there's more emissions, definitely it's something that could be considered on a, you know, from a state level or from the perspective of districts that own their own buses. However, like as far as state funding is concerned, like where is it coming from? Because right now we're getting a lot of money, and my whole perspective on it is I don't really know how. I thought the state was like pretty close to bankrupt before COVID, and now somehow we're getting money. I know that we're getting some money from the federal government, but I'd love to know where that would come from, besides the taxpayer, which again, then the whole state is paying for one city's emissions, and with maybe not a lot of clarity, because how many people really pay attention to the state spending. And then the as far as like a comment like, why should this be Wallingford's problem? It's not Wallingford's problem, but it is. But as a part of a community, it's just it's we are a part of the system that is creating the problem, right? And while we may be much smaller part of the system, if we have the ability to lead in certain things, whether it be massage parlors, whether it be e-cigarettes, whether it be electric buses, being a STEM town, all of the other innovative things that we do here in Wallingford, why not us? And that is the question that I ask myself every day at work. When I decided with no children to run for Board of Ed, why not me? Why not? Like, you have to ask yourself, if I don't pick this up, who will? And I have many friends who don't understand why I do Board of Ed, and it's because I feel a sense of community. And because I have a passion for like continuing to learn. I'm a lifelong learner. I read a lot. If you guys watch the book Board of Ed meeting, the instructional committee, you will know that I am good at reading children's books. Um, and I'm not ashamed of it. I like to know what's going on. I like to know how kids are being educated. And I think that you always have to ask yourself, okay, if something came to us as a reasonable proposal, why should we not look at it? And that's all I'm asking for as far as the school bus situation is.
Good comment. Let me just clarify mine and then we'll close out the show. What I was referring to was a concept, really. If it's a national problem and a state problem, it should be tackled on a statewide basis so that individual towns aren't on their own negotiating, and you have a patchwork of contractual patterns, and maybe one town gets a better deal than the next town. And my thought was, the state of Connecticut should have a uniform policy so that all towns get some sort of equitable assistance, and the purchase of electric bus fleets goes forward in a coordinated way, maybe using the state as for leverage in purchasing these things, rather than have Wallingford sort of out on its own, or the Wallingford taxpayers going first, because it's a lot of money. That's all I was saying. But to be continued, because you're going to have another meeting. We're going to have, more specific proposals, and maybe we'll get back to you. Let's close it off. Everyone, all raise your hand. It's unanimous. We're going to close it off. Thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show, Autumn. We do appreciate it. And thank you, viewers, for watching. And we will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.